Thank you for your time.
No problem.
Where are you from?
I was born in Chile, Santiago. Yeah.
Do you live here?
I do live here, yes. I have been here for over 6 years.
What do you do for living?
I'm a teacher. I teach English and I teach Spanish to Japanese people. My major was Japanese a long time ago in Chile. For some reasons, I went to Australia, and while I was there, I could find a job to move to Japan, because moving from Chile to Japan directly is very difficult in the field of education. So I could do it from Australia.
Why did you decide to study Japanese?
Basically, this is really interesting. My uncle, he was an army officer in Chile. You know, the army has these like trips around the world. So he came to Japan in the like 70s, 80s. At that time, Chile was not quite developed. He brought back home a couple of things from Japan. So he brought like pictures of Japan, electronics and stuff like that. When I first saw that, I was like, oh, this is really interesting, you know? And I just like got curious. Oh, this is really interesting. Someday I'm gonna be able to understand this. When I was a child, there was animation, culture and all that kind of thing. I also met some Japanese people when I was like a teenager, people that I met like casually, and I was like, oh, this culture seems really interesting. Because in like 90s, 80s, 90s, we didn't have much immigration, and we welcomed some Chinese immigrants, and there were some Chinese people, some Korean people, and some Japanese people. So it was like, oh, this is really interesting. And out of the 3 languages, I thought Japanese was the most interesting one. Because of, you know, you have kanji, hiragana, katakana. So it's like, oh, how do you guys write? How do you guys use that? That's why I decided to study the language. Yeah.
What type of Japanese people do you think become more good at speaking other languages?
Oh, wow, that's an interesting question. My students usually ask me that question, you know, like what should I do to become like more fluent? I guess the main thing, what you have to do, you have to be like extremely open-minded. You have to somehow understand that when you learn a new language, you also learn a new culture. So there are some things that you cannot say the way you would just express them in your own language. Because that happens to me every time, you know. Japanese and Spanish people think they are different, but my dialect of Spanish, I think that the way we do things is similar to Japanese. It's just easier for me sometimes to understand the Japanese mindset. But in the case of English, we have many cultural differences. And what helped me was just being open-minded, thinking, oh, Panju is a different language. That's why people do things this way.
Do you think most of Chilean people understand English?
No. No.
Comparing with Japanese?
No. I was fortunate because my mother speaks English. That's why I can speak English. I would say like not many people speak English.
People who want to go to Chile, they should understand Spanish.
Yes and no, but overall I would say that Chileans are very helpful. We try to communicate it anyway somehow, you know. So if we see like a foreigner who's having trouble, we will try to help them. We have like this sense of hospitality as well. So it's something traditional, like in my country, like we have a folk song that talks about this, and you have to be nice and kind to foreigners. So when we see a foreigner in need, we're like, oh, I want to help. So if you don't know like the language, you may use Google Translator or something like that. But people are very helpful, I would say. Yeah.
How Japanese people, are they helpful for you?
My experience so far has been extremely positive, I would say. I haven't had any problems. People always ask me, or people sometimes like share stories, you know, of like bad things happening. I have never had a bad experience. The other thing that comes to mind is maybe once when I first came in, I had to do my taxes. And I made a mistake when doing the kakute shinkoku. The officer was not happy, and he assumed that the mistake was because I didn't understand what I was reading. So I wanted to say something and he would interrupt me. But the moment he understood that it had been a problem with the calculations because I made a mistake, and I explained that to him, no problem. Yeah.
Shinkoku is even difficult for Japanese.
That thing is just, yeah, taxes, I know.
What is something about your country you are actually proud of?
I think that our educational system teaches us a lot about other countries. We are aware of the world. Something I really like about the Chilean educational system in my country is that we know that we are one country in the world. We are kind of like curious and open-minded. Of course, there are exceptions. Some people might not have that mindset, but people I've met, usually they are open-minded and curious. So if something strange happens, you're like, oh, why is this happening? Maybe a cultural difference. And of course, like other things like wine, our wine is good, even though I don't drink, but that's what people always tell me, like, oh, Chilean wine is so good. And I'm like, thank you, but I don't drink. So I have no idea. Wine, of course, based on what I've heard. Soccer players, of course, you know, we have many famous soccer players. And yeah, I'm also happy with the fact that the country has developed a lot. I mean, during the last maybe 20 years. So when I went back to Chile in December last year, what I saw, I was like, wow, this is impressive, you know. We have some problems, of course. It's not a perfect country, but that's what I'm proud of. I really like it. Yeah.
Easter Island is in Chile, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Have you ever been there?
Kind of.
What do you mean kind of?
Kind of. I was physically there, waiting for a plane, but I was not visiting the island. You know what I mean? So we were like on our way to Australia with my mother and our family. The plane had to stop there to get more fuel and then continue flying. So I was technically there, you know, at the airport. My eyes are there, but I didn't go and visit, you know. So I was technically there, but I didn't visit the island.
Are you married?
Yes, I'm married. Yes.
Is your wife here a Chilean person?
Yeah, my wife is from Chile as well.
What point of your wife did you think was attractive to you?
That's interesting. Wow. Well, we were classmates, you know. So first we shared like interests. I would say personality. She's lovely as well. I like her. I love her so much. But when we first met, it was like her personality. I found it magnetic, interesting. I'm not quite talkative in general. This is unacceptable, but in general, you know, I'm not quite talkative. So she was also not very talkative. So our personalities are quite compatible.
Classmate, which school, like university?
Yes, we were university classmates.
So she studied Japanese?
Exactly. So this is strange because like we were organizing an event. We had a cultural exchange event called like Nihon Matsuri. I was in charge of organizing the event, coordinating everything, you know, calling suppliers and all that stuff. I had been doing that with my classmates. So I had a very good team, and among the people who helped me, yeah, my wife was there. So I was like, oh, I really like this girl, you know, because we clicked immediately, you know, like there were things to do and I would ask her, could you please do this for me? Could you please help me with that? And she would just do it immediately. So I was like, I really like her, you know, yeah.
So what kind of people do you think popular in your country?
I would say that in general, Chileans do not worry much about the way somebody looks. It's more about like how people are, the personality. Of course, like, you know, like teenagers are like, oh, this famous actor, this famous actress, they're so beautiful and all that stuff. But in general, when people choose a partner, they don't think much about that. They just worry about like how the person is.
So do you think like Japanese women or men can be popular in Chile?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've met like a couple of people who are married to Japanese citizens. Since I was a child, I've always liked Asian features. Yes. So, yes. Probably I'm not the right person to ask, but in general, I would say that Asian features are quite, people like that. Because of like, you know, animation and also media, probably the idea that people have of Japanese people in general is a little bit different from reality. People sometimes in Chile ask me, is it true that in Japan this happens? And I'm like, where did you hear that? Oh, they were saying this on YouTube, and I'm like, huh? And then I asked Japanese people, you know, I heard this, and they were like, what are you talking about, you know?
Japanese people can be more like confident.
Yeah, I guess like, I mean, generally speaking, well, I mean, when I was a student, we had some Japanese exchange like students who visited our university. There were some girls who were like, oh, I like you, you know, I want to date you and so on.
Do you know any Japanese who's famous in your country?
Visual kei artists, they're very popular. Toshiki-san, Gakuto-san, L'Arc-en-Ciel. Also like other bands like Gazetto, they visual kei rock band.
Japanese musicians are famous.
Yeah. I mean, some of these bands, they hold concerts and people go there. 2003, I'm talking about 2001, 2003, when I was in high school. There was like a fashion movement called Pokemon. People call themselves Pokemon. It was like a fashion trend, like where people dressed like following the visual kei trends, and maybe later the Gazette became popular. Of course, like there are some famous like manga authors, like for Sailor Moon, for example, is super famous. Toriyama Akira, Dragon Ball. Katsura Masakazu. He draws like women, you know, very, I would say, Japanese realistic features. His drawings are very popular.
What country, except for Japan, do you like?
I like Spain very much. Very beautiful country. And I was surprised by the cultural differences we had because we speak the same language, right? We speak Spanish, but Spanish in Spain is different from Spanish in Chile. So do not underestimate dialects. But I like Spain, very beautiful country. And visiting, my family loved traveling, so we visited many countries. I would like to visit Portugal again. I just like this, you know. Yeah. Maybe Portuguese people will get angry if they listen, if they hear this, but like I felt that Spain and Portugal are similar, but Portugal is more like traditional. The atmosphere is really nice, so people was really kind, good food, a lot of culture, slow-paced life there. I would like to go there again. I haven't lived there, right? I just visited. I was there for a week. Was that people were like relaxed and everything was okay. Nobody was worried. You know?
Japan is totally different, but you've been here for like 6 years?
Yeah.
Do you wanna still live in Japan?
Yeah, I really like it.
Yeah.
I really like this country.
Why? It's so busy in Japan.
It's busy, but at the same time, I mean, it's peaceful. So you can have a peaceful life here. And also like people are nice, very, I would say, accepting of like foreigners.
For now, you don't have any idea to go to another country, so you don't.
Just want to stay here for a long, long time, forever, if I can, yeah.
I wanna know that, how Chilean people express the sound of animals.
Okay.
So I will say the name of animals, so please answer.
Okay.
Dog.
For dogs, we say wow wow.
Cat.
Cats, meow. This really happened. So in Chile, when you wanna call cats, you want them to approach you, you say. You do this like this thing. Cats actually come, you know. Even stray cats, like there could be a cat on near a tree. You do this, and they approach you. Oh, a kitty.
Chilean technique.
Maybe.
Pose.
We don't have like an onomatopoeia for that. We do have a verb. Yeah, you would just use the verb and say relinchar. Relinchar, a very fancy word in Spanish. You just use the verb and say the horse is doing that stuff, you know. Very fancy word. Don't worry about that word. Nobody ever uses that. You say oink oink, like in English, yeah.
Cow.
Cows, you say moo.
Moo.
We have a verb for that. You would say muhir.
Elephant.
I don't know the onomatopoeia. We have a verb for that. Very strange verb. Let me just remember. Remember it. Very strange word. Barritar, you say. Nobody ever uses that. So if you're watching the video and you're learning Spanish, forget this word because nobody ever uses that, okay?
Sheep.
Be. Be. Yeah. But again, you use a verb. You would say balar.
Goat.
Oh my goodness. I should know this because my aunt lives in the countryside. Wait, I think it's the same. Because it's the same sound like be. Yeah.
In Japan, people say me. Both.
I could be wrong, you know, but that's what I remember people said. We do make a difference between those two animals, but it's got to do with behavior. Let's say that you draw a comparison and use a sheep. You're talking about the person being very, very docile, like they won't complain about anything. If you compare someone and then use a goat, you're saying that they're crazy. Crazy as in like having like strange ideas. Goats tend to jump and run around like that. That's where the comparison comes from.
In Japan, there is a word, that insulting word, baka. I think you know that. And its kanji is horse and deer.
なるほど。
Monkey.
I have no idea. Los monitos, el monito que hace, I have no idea. No. If somebody knows, please tell us. I have no idea. Quack quack. Pío pío.
Frog.
Croar. Those animals, we do have them in Chile, but it's not, you don't see them often.
Rooster.
Roosters, Ha! Kikiriki. Kikiriki. Kikiriki.
So this is the last question, and it's the most stupid question. What if you had to choose, you can't brush your teeth forever, or you can't cut your nail forever? Which do you choose?
Oh God, Jesus Christ. Okay, you said you cannot cut your nails forever. I choose that one. You know why? You mentioned the word cutting, but you didn't say I couldn't file them. If you don't brush them, you lose them, right? How the hell do you eat, you know? But like nails, I'm not allowed to cut them. That means no nail clippers, no scissors. But nobody mentioned anything about filing my nails. So I could buy a file and then you see what I mean? So I would choose that option. That was interesting.
Thank you for cooperation.
No problem.
Thank you.